Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. Today I'm speaking with Steve and Ray Torcaso of the Torcaso Shoe Repair Shop. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, it's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
The shoe shop has been around in Kenosha for a long time. How did it get started?
You wanna?
Sure. My grandfather came here from Italy when he was 16 years old in 1923. He was a shoemaker by trade. He had started his apprenticeship in Italy. He was only 5 years old when he started learning.
How do you start learning at 5?
He was apprenticed out from someone.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's...
Yes.
Okay. So he was an apprentice at age 5. Go ahead.
Yes.
Right. And he started working, I forgot where he was working at, it could have been Vincent McCall, was it, I think?
Okay.
And then he saved up enough money to start his own shoe repair shop in 1927. And it was located on 52nd Street in the Vogue Theater building. The Vogue Theater, the entrance was in the center of the building, and there was two small side stores on it, and he was on the west side of the store. And I think at one time Paelli's Bakery even was on the other side, you know.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. And then you want to continue on?
Well, no, then I like when you do that part, you know?
Okay, well then I'll do it. The benefits of being the older brother, even though I don't look
He's better on dates.
Yeah. So he had that shop there in the Vogue Theater into the early 1930s. And of course, we all know what happened in 1929, the stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. So what happened was nobody had any money. They didn't have money, busy fixing shoes, but no one had money to pay. They were carried on the books or whatever. And at some point, you couldn't pay your bills with a loaf of bread if someone brought you a loaf of bread or 6 eggs or whatever. And I always remember him saying, I think it was, he said things were so bad, even though hamburger was, I think he said it was 10 cents a pound, I didn't have the dime to buy it. That's how things were bad. And people, I guess we don't really realize how bad it was. So eventually he had so much money on the books, and then you couldn't pay. He would have to run to the hardware store sometimes to buy nails to put the heels on because he couldn't buy the stock to keep on the shelves. So eventually then he had to close his shop. And you want to go from there?
No, but I mean, the people that couldn't pay him, they weren't trying to stick him.
No.
They were just all in that same boat. I mean, it was just bad timing to start a shop.
Yeah, it was.
You know.
So, and then his friend was here from Italy, Mr. Roselli, who had a shoe repair shop. And he started working for him then in that shop.
Yeah.
And
when was that? Do you remember?
It had to be shortly after he closed his shop in the early 30s, maybe 32, 33, somewhere in there. I'm not 100% certain on the year. And my dad then joined working with my grandpa and Mr. Roselli when he was 9 years old, and that was 1936. So we know for sure by 1936 they were working, you know. And my dad said up until that point, till he was 9, it was wine, women, and song. That was his.
And he said then Grandpa pulled him off the streets.
Yeah, to go to work.
Yeah, to go to
and
work.
It was a busy time for shoe repair, and there were a lot of shoe repair shops in Kenosha at that time. And you know, Kenosha was what, a third of the size as it was now in the early 30s, and there was 36 shoe repair shops in Kenosha. You know,
and 2 or 3 finders for supplies in town.
Right, that were actually in town that sold the supplies. Right. You know, and so it was really a busy time. It was a time where everyone had shoes fixed, including the little kids, because all the shoes were made so well, and they were all leather shoes.
Leather or rubber.
Right. There was no Walmarts or Kmarts to buy very inexpensive shoes. Nothing wrong with it, but there wasn't that type of shoe then.
Right.
know.
You didn't see any plastics, any of that
Exactly.
kind of stuff. And because everybody was, they didn't get their shoes fixed because they wanted to get shoes fixed. They couldn't afford to buy new shoes.
Exactly.
Probably, you know, and that's why when they bought shoes for their children, they would get them fixed and get them fixed and get them fixed, and then when they grew out of them, they pass it down to the younger one, and they would keep getting them fixed until they couldn't be fixed anymore, until the shoes literally were done. You
And
know.
that was assuming they were all the same size as they
Well, as they grow
Well,
into them, because when they're kids,
you'll
you know,
grow into 'em
Yeah,
when-
but you wouldn't do that now.
No.
You know, we know now that's not the right thing to do, is pass on shoes, because everyone wears them differently
But
on
they
the
did what
inside
they
and
had
the
to
outside.
do, Steve.
But yeah, when there's no money, that's what they had to do. You know, so it was a interesting time. So they worked for Mr. Roselli, who actually had 2 shoe repair shops.
Right.
One in the location that we were at on 7th Avenue downtown and 57th Street,
Yes.
and
Oh, when did we move downtown? When, what, you know, he worked for Mr. Roselli in
Mr. Roselli had it
1936,
downtown.
and then that's where he had his shop?
correct.
Yes.
Yes. So most of the seniors, and they'll remember where we were on 7th Avenue, 57th Street, because we were there 49 years in that location. But around the corner, Mr. Roselli also had a shoe repair shop. It was called Kenosha Shoe Repair.
Right.
And it was the budget shop. And that's where my dad worked, at the budget shop. That's where he honed the trade. You know, he shined shoes. And it was a time when, how busy it was, they were open 7 days a week till midnight.
Yes.
That's how busy it was. And I'm sure they weren't the only ones. And so many shoe shines. My dad said he used to shine 500-600 pairs of shoes a week.
Himself.
Himself.
And there was other shine boys.
And there may have been a half a dozen other shine boys too between those
because
places.
there was 2 shine stands.
Right, 2 shine stands. There was a men's shine stand
And a woman's.
and a woman's shine stand, because even ladies got shoes shined then. Everything was leather, you know. So then in 1947, right? It was in 1947. Mr. Roselli decided to go into the dry cleaning business.
On a whim.
Yeah, we don't know exactly the whole story. But so in the store on 7th Avenue, he enclosed the shoe repair part because, you know, dust and stuff doesn't
Right.
go with clean clothes after they've been
And
laundered.
horrible, strong chemical
And chemicals,
smells
you know.
at that time.
Right,
No, the chemicals were from the dry cleaning.
right.
Yes, but there
Yes,
was
and the shoes
Okay.
too.
the shoes had different cements. Well, the cements today are very strong too, but they worked with a lot of solvents back then that were really brutal, really bad for your health.
Just like dry cleaners were too.
Right.
They had the naphtha, which was terrible for
But
your health.
where the shop was, they encased the walls in glass, so the shop would be in there and then keep the dust out from
Right.
everything.
And then they realized soon that it just didn't go together.
No.
And they really, Mr. Roselli needed more space for the dry cleaning. And so then my grandpa took over that shop, bought that shop from him in 1947. And that's where the location remained for the next 49 years. And then in 1996, moved to 52nd Street across from Tenuta's.
Yes.
And we're there about 10 years, right?
Almost 11.
11 years. And the business there, the insurance business, was going to expand and take the spot that we were renting. So then we moved into a spot on 39th Avenue right next to Principe Plumbing. And we were there for, you know, time blends together, maybe
Another
10 maybe
years
another 10
there.
years. And then,
Wonderful people.
yeah, they were wonderful. And, but they were getting to the point where they wanted to sell their building.
Well,
you know,
the one was up in age, the
Right.
other one was retired, and
And-
then the other brother passed away.
exactly.
So,
So yeah, so
and they were much like us.
Yeah.
Their father owned the business. They all grew
Yes.
up in it. They didn't really, towards the end, they didn't want to do a lot of work, but they liked to come in
and
in the
socialize.
shop and sit down in their shop,
Yeah,
you
and
know, because it becomes part of you.
So then when that happened, then we moved to 60th Street and 33rd Avenue,
Yeah.
60th Street. So that's where we are today.
Yeah.
Okay, and when did each of you start working in the shop?
We both started
Started
in
in
1970. I was 13, close to 14.
11
And
and
you're
a
about
half,
11 and
very
a half.
close to 12. I got a late start. I was
Yeah, he was a
lazy.
bum. Until he was 11. So that's where we
Yeah.
work. And
And
That's
what did
when
you do?
That's when we officially started.
yeah,
But honestly, we grew up hanging around the shop long before that.
we hid in the car.
And on Fridays was there. My father would go home for dinner and then go back to work. Me and him would hide in the back seat of the car before he went back to work, so we could sit there and and go hang around. And sometimes
Yeah.
he'd let us.
Yeah, he knew we were doing
Yeah,
that. you
so
know.
he wouldn't do it every week.
Yeah, I wouldn't
but
every week,
but every so often he'd let us sneak through and do it. So.
And by that time, they weren't open to midnight anymore.
Right.
That ended probably in the late 50s, early 60s, or
Because
whatever.
I don't know if
So-
you remember, but Dad said at one time there was like 7 shoe repair shops just within like a 3-block radius of downtown. Because downtown was the hub.
Yeah.
So what kind of jobs did you do? You also worked for your grandfather because he was still up to
He was
Oh, yeah,
still
we all
there.
worked
He was-
together.
Yeah. He worked almost till he passed in 1977, grandfather. And my dad, the same thing. He worked there, almost till he passed too in 2007.
Yes, and
you know.
that is my goal.
Yeah.
That is my goal.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of jobs that you did.
Sure.
You started out shining shoes.
Right. I started out polishing shoes, and I polished shoes with my my cousin. And then Steve started out waiting on people
On the counter.
on the counter, and then later on, you
Started doing some
started
of the,
doing the patchwork, the sewing of shoes and stuff.
and he was all the time learning how to fix shoes, watching.
Yeah.
And
I think I drove my grandpa nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, all I did was ask questions all day long. All day long, I would watch. So by the time I actually put my hands on a pair, I knew what to do up here, but then it was just developing to get what I knew up here down
the
to my
hands
hands.
to work. Yeah, the skills.
Yeah.
So, and that's the only way to learn.
Yes.
Learn from a master, and then you become a master shoemaker. Some people prescribe themselves as masters or a master shoemaker after doing it for a year or two. There's no way you're a master shoemaker or repair person in a year or two.
Unfortunately, I think there's a
know.
lot of people in all trades that think if they do something for just
Yes.
because they do it all of a sudden because they hang up a shingle that they're
Exactly.
great.
What
you
does
know?
it take to be a master shoemaker?
Oh, you have to learn the shoe inside and out.
Yes.
You can build it from scratch. Like Ray can make shoes. My grandpa could make shoes from scratch. Ray could make shoes from scratch. He's made cowboy boots, sandals.
I used to make Western boots,
Right.
sandals.
Did you ever make your own shoes?
One pair,
And he made me a pair.
and I made you a pair of
cowboy
boots.
boots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's
you
nothing
just
like
get
it.
the materials for the uppers and you get the materials for the soles and you...
Yes. You
You have to make the mold and
the problem with making stuff like that is everybody wants something custom made, but they don't realize that it's not going to be $10 more than what you bought a pair for off the shelf.
yeah, it's a lot of time.
You know.
How much did you have to learn about the foot in order to make a pair of shoes? I mean, you measure feet?
You measure feet, and then you take, like for boots, you take it across your instep, by the ankle, how high up the top of the boot's gonna go, and by your, like I said, by your arch, by your metatarsal area up here, and then the length you have to allow for.
What kind of tools did you use to measure feet or as early as you were doing it? Did they have the same tools as today that measure feet, or did you do something else?
A soft tape measure. You know, you put your foot on a piece of paper and you draw it out. Nowadays they have they have like a pad you can step your foot down into and then leave an imprint. I never did that. Before that, they had like an ink pad with a top that you would step over and walk over and would leave a ink imprint. But I did it the old way, which was a way I was taught, was a piece of, it's called, the color of the paper is goldenrod. And then what you do is you put that down, and then you make a solution of baking soda, like a paste, slurry of that in water, and rub it on the guy's bare foot and let him walk on that paper, and when it dries it leaves an orangish red imprint of the foot. And that's when you would take your last and line it up to that imprint, and then take the measurements on those spots that I told you, the high end step, low end step, you know, metatarsal area, the front.
And how long would a process like that take?
It took me a long time because I did it for fun. Because I am not a master. All right, I did it as enjoyment. For me, it's something I always wanted to learn how to do because I figured that would make me better at what I do. So it would take me a couple weeks to do a pair if I was to work on it constantly.
Okay, so the education process in doing the work that you did came from where?
Actually, for the bootmaking course, there was a week course, but before that week course, I had bought books and literature on it, and I had the equipment, and I took this course for a week. And the reason why I was okay at it is because I had all the knowledge from shoe repair.
The skills.
It's not like I'm just coming in off the street and just want to learn this and don't know anything.
So basically your education was your grandfather,
Right.
father, and then courses to do extra things.
Right.
He knew how to hand weld shoes and boots, but
Right.
you know, he had all those skills, you know, because on the shoe repair part, he is a master shoe repair.
And I can work a sewing machine. I mean, but like when I took the course, the guy goes, "Wow, you can sew."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, well, I do it all the time, you know. It was just little things that he did different that were in the books. And those are little things I picked up, and then I added some of my own over time. You know, because it's always
you're a master
learning.
shoe repair
Yes.
person. How do you get a certificate? Do you have to go through some kind of testing procedure? Or
They do that in Europe, but we don't have that here. But there was every so often they have it's called the Silver Cup contest, and it's for shoemakers, cobblers, you know, for shoe repair, and you send in a pair of shoes that need repair that have never been fixed before, and you send in the unrepaired mate, and then you repair the other one to the closest spec of what the original would be. And I only did that one time, and I think that was I got the plaque. I believe it was 2008.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of rules you got to follow. But I didn't follow any of them. I just fixed the darn shoes the way I would have done it if they came in. And I ended up in third place. And the thing that was interesting that year, that was the first year that they allowed the European shoe repair shops from all over to enter.
So they had tons of entries.
Right. Before it was just all these years. It's been around for almost 100 years, the contest. And it was limited just to North America, and and even Canada had their own part of division of it. Well, this when I started, it was the whole world. I came in third. And I know the guy that won. And he's a nice man. He's been over to my house for dinner. He's from Sweden. I would have came in second had I had just on my half sole entry, which a half sole is just what it sounds like. You don't go all the way. It's not the whole bottom. If that was the toe and that was the heel, you'd go about 3 fingers from the breast of your heel, and that's where your splice would be. And it saves you some, that saves you some money. And I had a single heel in a lighter color than what the original was, because I didn't want to waste a pair. And if I would have used the darker heel that was in between both colors, which I didn't have a single of, I would have had second place. You know, and
so pretty good.
Yeah, I was happy. I was very happy.
And you got a certificate. And
yeah, I got a plaque. I just haven't put
plaque,
it up.
that's what it was. Yeah.
That says
I didn't do it for a. I didn't do it for a pat on the back or look at me. I did it because I wanted to see how I always felt I was good, because I have the desire to keep never being satisfied with what I turn out. And I think everybody that's a true craftsman should feel that way. You always want to do better than what you did. So I did it to validate how I felt amongst my peers.
So you had shoes as the basis of the business.
Yes.
So repair, shine.
That's our bread and butter.
Other things products have you worked with, or?
Oh, we've done a lot of belts, of shortening belts. Do a lot of that.
We try not to turn anything down. There's some
Yeah,
things we can't do, but things that you wouldn't think, of course, purses and luggage. They've even fixed saddles. One of the interesting things over the years, and when Joe Louis was here training for a fight at Lakefront Stadium, they brought in his headgear. The straps on his headgear broke, and my grandpa had to fix the straps on the
right
headgear.
away.
So whatever that we could do, we would do it. You know, they even, don't laugh, but they even fix girdle straps, remember, years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever they could do, they did, you know, and it's still the same today. And of course, things have changed. There's different things now that they never had to bring in back then, you know. Yeah. And now with all the shoes that aren't constructed as well, they couldn't always fix those years ago, but now they can, because they've come up with different cements and stuff like that, you know. So you have to adapt, you know, to
And your sister
keep up with
works
the
at
market.
the
My
shop
sister
all
works with me.
right? How
yes.
long has she been doing work at the shop?
She has
42
worked with me
years.
for 42 years.
Yeah, 42.
At least with me.
Right. Yeah.
And she
What
does.
does she do?
She does the polishing, and she does all the sewing.
The rep work and a lot of the odd work, like I talked about before.
yes.
Too. You do. You
Right.
do too. You know, because see, in 1980 we expanded and had bought a shoe repair shop out in Lake Geneva.
Right.
So we had 2 shops for 42 years, right?
Right.
We just closed
right.
that one. Not that it wasn't busy, but Ray had some health issues. It was too straining because it was just too much work and too much travel time, you know, driving back and forth.
Yeah.
So
Drove to work every day.
yeah.
From Kenosha to Lake Geneva,
Right.
back and
Yeah,
forth.
back and forth, all kinds of weather, you know. So it just became too much when
I was going for treatments, and then when you go for that, and it was tired, and
It was just-
my sister had some. She lost her husband,
so it was just too much at the end.
and it was just too much.
So now we just have the one here
Yeah.
in Kenosha.
Makes it easier
So
for
when you
both
had
of us.
2 shops, who worked where?
I was in. What would happen is I'd go out to Lake Geneva. Actually, me and my sister worked out there for a long time, until about almost 16 years ago when Dad passed away.
Yeah, then we all like going to Lake Geneva,
Right.
me and Dad, so we take a turn going out there because it was being like at Club Med,
Yeah.
you know, out there, because there was stuff to do. So different places to go and eat. So, but it was basically Ray and Paula
Yes.
who ran that store.
And then
but,
your
you know,
dad was still running the shop.
he was still
Right.
here,
Okay.
and I was here with him.
And then
Yeah.
when he passed away, we wanted to keep both stores going.
So
So,
then they
my
separated.
sister would go work in Kenosha. I'd be out in Lake Geneva. I'd save the jobs, the sewing, things like that for my sister, and I did all the soles and all the heels, because the difference is I can do everything. I only taught her. Yeah, she is limited on the other stuff. She doesn't.
And some things took strength that
Right.
she didn't have. You know, when you have to rip off those hard soles to rip off, she couldn't. She didn't have the strength to do that.
And as
Not
I
that
get
she couldn't
as I
learn
get
it.
older, either mine
know
get
it.
that way.
Yeah.
But it's not like there was a lot of other things to do that
Oh, there's
certainly
plenty.
Yeah.
within her
Yes.
talents and,
Right.
and good at what she does.
She is good
she
at
is
what
good
she
at what
does.
she
She's
does.
fast.
She's a good people person.
Yeah, she's very good at the counter.
Okay. What kind of specialized equipment do you need to repair a
There,
shoe?
let's see. I would have. I'm just thinking real quick in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's actually 5 essential pieces
Machinery.
of machinery that you would have to have in order to have any type of shop today, and that
These
would be.
machines would do what types of operations?
Okay, the one is called the finisher, which is a big grinding machine, because nothing comes in. That's part of the skill. Nothing comes into your size.
fit perfectly.
Everything has to get close to your size, and then things have to be trimmed, ground to fit. So that finisher has sanding wheels on it, and then it has a trimmer for ladies. They're called top lifts. It's the last piece of material that a woman wears on the back of her heel. When you change that, it's for trimming that. And then it has a sole trimmer, so it puts a nice edge on the, just what it sounds like, a finished edge on your sole. When you put the soles on, you have to have what's called a 5-in-1, which is a machine that cuts sheets of material. And when you do what's a half sole, you run it through the machine and it skives off the back of the half sole for the joint to get you started, so you don't have to grind that all down to get it to that spot. And you need a buffing machine to finish the shoes, to polish the shoes. And the other piece of equipment that you have to have is a sewing machine, a patching machine they call it. You know,
Something
for
to
sewing
stitch
for stitching all the uppers, purse straps, belts, all that kind of stuff. You bring in your shoes and a seam is tore or loose, you got to be able to sew it. Those are the machines you have to have. And then there's other pieces of equipment that you should have in order to be a shop today.
Do you also do hand work on some of these shoes? I mean,
I have a lot of hand tools. You know, at one time, shoes were all made by hand. I mean, everything, even the uppers were stitched by hand at one point. I mean, not in my lifetime, but you know, I still have all the hand tools. If I wanted to make a pair, if you really wanted to make a pair, I could sew the uppers on a machine, you know, to sew the upper pattern, and then everything else I could do by hand. I could do with my knife in my hand tools. But then the point is, it only take me like 6 times longer, and I'd be worn out a lot quicker.
But you know, like the sewing machines, like it's not just one for rip work. You have 3 patchers, right?
Yes.
And you have 4 stitchers?
I have 3 stitchers for stitching what's called a Goodyear Walton shoe, which is a strip of leather that you see on the outside where you see the threads. And then that's for sewing those kind of soles on. And then I have 2 stitchers. They're called McKay stitchers. And that's for sewing, like if you had a moccasin to put a sole on, it sews through the inside of your shoe and through the sole. A lot of, most of the shoes growing up were the Goodyear Walton shoes. But now with everything coming in from third world countries and most of Europe,
And a lot of the casual shoes.
with the exception of England, because England still they're really big on Goodyear Walton shoes. But otherwise, most of the world, everything coming in is either cemented only or McKay'd. So now that those 2 machines that I said that were McKay stitchers used to be what I call a luxury item. you get by without them, but it'd be nice to have them for when you need it. Now you have to have them.
So,
And you have the press too for pressing.
Yes,
the
but
soles.
then again,
That's a luxury sort of.
it's a luxury item.
Yeah.
It saves a lot on your shoulder,
Right.
you know, and you get a nice bond.
okay, so how has shoe repair changed from your even back to your dad's days to today? I mean, you mentioned earlier shoes were made of leather or rubber.
Even
What
the
has
cheap
happened?
ones.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened is,
PVC.
yeah, the when they opened the floodgates, like from China and the countries to come in and make these cheap imported shoes of this material that was, in some cases, it was cheaper to buy a pair than it was even for us to get the material to fix them. You know, when they first come out.
It was PVC is polyvinyl chloride.
Right.
And they started making soles out of that instead of leather, and then the
Right.
tops and vinyl. And people don't realize how really bad they are for their feet because they don't breathe like
Right.
leather, you know. And the problem is now it's just hard to find shoe companies that make things out of leather, you know.
Yeah.
They're still there, but so many of them, they have good fake leathers that you think, oh, I'm buying leather shoes. If you don't read on the inside what the upper materials are made of, more than likely they're man-made materials, you know.
We are lucky here because we have Allen Edmonds
Right.
so close by.
Yeah, and Portage, right?
Yes. They make a great shoe. They always made a great shoe. They're a great shoe today, but back then there was many great shoes. What happened is all those companies that made good shoes started to cheapen their shoes to keep the price the same. Allen Edmonds made the shoes the same way and just raised the price accordingly to
Right.
keep what it was, and then
Keep the quality.
keep the quality where it was. It's not like no one else made them as good. They just kept going down to keep the
Two
price
ways of
down.
doing business. One
Yes.
to compete and be able to be in the
Yeah.
business,
Yes.
and the other one to just do what they do and continue on. Well,
Right.
what do you
Right.
face when you try to repair something today? I mean, you mentioned earlier solvents and glue and
What I face today is I joke around and say now I got to be a chemist, is because it's not just PVC. There's the PVC, there's TR, which is thermoplastic rubber. There's PU, which is the bulk of it, which is polyurethane. Then there's TP, what the heck is it? I am having a memory stroke. There's combinations of those, and you have to know what to use. And until the last 20 years, not even, we didn't really have glues and primers that we knew about available to us in this country. Now we do, but it's like learning how to do it.
And when we were growing up, we always had leather shoes. They made sure that we had
Yes.
leather shoes. There was no, we didn't wear PF Flyers. I think that was the big penny at the time. There
Like
wasn't
that.
Nike or anything.
We went to Penny's next door and got leather uppers, leather sole
Exactly,
shoes.
you're right, yeah. So we're kind of
so
spoiled.
did you grow up with a lot of pair of shoes, or they just keep getting fixed over and over again? Unless you grew out of them, of course.
Yeah, because we had them fixed till they couldn't be fixed no
Yeah,
more.
and then
You
till
know.
Dad started selling men's shoes
Yeah.
for a while. Then I will say we were like a mold
I know it's, yeah, we had tons of shoes and we
had
sold
a lot of
men's
shoes.
So we sold those for a short
Yeah.
time on there. That
So,
was,
what are some of the strange things you've had to repair, or replace?
Oh.
That people brought in saying, "Gee, you know, can you?"
Paula's, she stitched leather stuffed animals, like
The whole animal was leather.
yeah, you know how they make a stuffed animal, and
seat covers,
seat covers,
tents,
uh, a hernia.
Yeah.
She's not happy about that one. A
Yeah.
hernia belt thing. Prosthesis, a men's leg.
Yeah, those are-
The guy would take it off and he had to fix the strap on it. You know, it's bras. She stitched a couple of bras for a lady, and I got to say, made Dolly Parton look small. I don't know what the rest of her looked like, but I don't care. It was.
Did you ever make anything for an industry?
Oh, yeah, you did.
Yeah, when Persh was the fire engine company, Peter Persh, when they were in town, when they had an order for, I think it was the big ladder one, they had to make a big washer, a leather washer for some part. It might be the part that, swings
Yeah,
or
no, I
whatever.
just
Whatever
remember.
it was, every so often they'd have to make one when they got the order for that.
Maybe for a pump or something?
It was a big piece of leather, and I honestly don't know why leather. I don't know, because it would swell,
I guess.
but you'd think it would get funky.
Did you ever end up with any customers who maybe had strange shoes that you had to deal with? Unusual sizes or things that go, oh my
We've
gosh.
had people with mismade shoes. I had a guy that wore a 9 and on one and a 10.5 on the other foot. He ended up buying 2 pair of shoes
Just to have one.
to have a pair. And he didn't. I told him there was a website, the National Odd Shoe Exchange,
Right,
for
yeah.
people with that problem.
Right.
They post what they have, the leftovers of, and hopefully someone else has the opposite problem.
Right.
Had that.
Anybody
There's
else,
a lot of
anybody
people with.
send things from long distances?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You had,
We had the one. Dad had the one from Kodiak, Alaska. Or
yes. Well, she lived near Kodiak,
she was
Alaska.
She
That
was an hour away
yeah.
from Kodiak, Alaska.
They used to live here, and she remember coming to the shoe shop when she was young,
a kid.
with her
Yeah.
parents or whatever. And at the time, the place in Kodiak was an hour away or so.
Yeah,
let's
it was
say.
like an hour away.
So not only an hour away, the prices there were so high, it was less money for her to pay for shipping
It
here.
was 2 pair of penny loafers
Yeah,
for
my
soles
dad to
and
fix
heels.
them and to mail them back, than for her to have it all done there.
Yeah.
And it made the papers all across the country. The AP picked
Yeah.
up the story. That was the furthest, I think. You still get shoes mailed to you.
Yeah,
And-
I get shoes
And
mailed.
sometimes other shoe repair shops mail shoes for ready to fix stuff that
I won't say
they're
names.
not. We won't say names, but they're not specialists in what needs to be fixed, and they'll send it to Ray to get fixed.
If they get a hard pair to do,
yeah.
they'll send it to me.
Okay. Could you buy a pair of shoes? What would it take to buy a pair of shoes and have them, how long could you buy a pair of shoes and have them last?
Well, a lot depends on what quality of shoe you bought,
And how you take care
how
of
you
them.
take care of them. I'm going to use Allen Edmonds for a reference point because I know what they are. If you took care of those, meaning you kept the uppers in good shape, they weren't dry, cracking, you rotated them so they had a chance to dry out so they wouldn't rot out from the inside out, you didn't wear them, you didn't wait to get them repaired where they were worn down horrible before you bring them in to get fixed.
You were pointing at my shoes. Are you trying to say something?
No, those aren't Allen Edmonds.
No, I know it. Right.
But you can take those apart and redo them plenty of times, depending on the welt. If the welt was still good,
And the welt is?
the welt is that little strip of leather on the outside that you see the sole stitched to, but it also holds the whole upper together, and it's stitched to the insole, so it holds. That's like your basement foundation,
Right.
for everything.
And
It
that
keeps-
welting, and you've changed welting many times on
Yes.
shoes, older shoes and stuff, But if the person hadn't taken care of the uppers, and dried, let salt eat them out and stuff like that.
Especially
Once
around
the upper
here.
starts to crack and deteriorate, then you can't sew on new welts.
But you'd have
Then-
to spend a certain amount of money on the good shoe to begin with.
Right.
which would
A good
be-
shoe, you spend that money up front, but if you maintain it properly, it gets cheap in the long run.
There's people have their shoes 40 or 50 years. They last when you buy those good shoes,
I just did a pair last
What
week.
do
said
you
had 'em
start
20
at
years.
saying a good shoe costs?
Well, again, I'll use Ellen Edmonds for a reference. Their regular shoes are probably around 300, between $3 and $375 for their standard shoes. You can buy seconds from them, but I'm just saying they're standard shoes. You know, at one time, if you got a really good shoe, you would have been talking $80.
Right.
You know, a good Bostonian.
Exactly. Nunn-Bush.
Any of those.
Weinberg.
Weinberg, any of those shoes were all around that or less. And they were all leather. But that's, you know, times change.
So if you pay that much money for a good pair of shoes, you can make them last a lifetime as long as they fit your feet.
Yes.
And
right.
I can do my end as long as you properly take care of your end a little bit and give me something to work with.
tell me a little bit about your grandfather. What was he like?
Grandpa was quite a character.
He was a character. He
Really.
Any examples?
Well, growing up there, you really learned how to work. Because,
Yeah.
like Ray said, they really took pride in their work. And when Ray was learning from my grandpa how to fix things, and he would never compliment,
Drove me nuts.
because he always wanted you to try to do better.
I want to show him what I did.
Yeah, but he would tell my dad, "Oh, Ray's got a great talent,"
Yeah.
but he wouldn't tell Ray.
I hear
that.
it through the back door.
Yeah.
He didn't want me to stop there, and it was,
Yeah.
and I was so irritated with him at the time,
Yeah.
but not realizing that it probably made me what I am today.
Yeah.
I always strive to do better. And I go like, geez, what would Grandpa see if I showed him? I know what you're going
he
to
was
go to.
serious and a joker. And when I said about learning how to work, now, and I'm not knocking kids or whatever, but they're at work and stuff, and I worked with young kids, and you ask them to do something. Well, yeah, as soon as I finish texting or whatever it is, there was nothing like that then. But one time, and there was mounds of shoes at the shoe to get fixed, and then they would pile them up to get put away.
He's not kidding.
And there was a huge pile one day. And my grandpa had told me, he said, "Steve, you put those shoes away." I said, "Okay, Grandpa, I don't even know what I was doing." I said, "It would be just a minute or two." So I continued on, and the next thing I knew, boom, he knocked everything over on the floor. So this 10-minute job took me an hour and 10 minutes because I had to sort through all the shoes, make sure they were mated, and put on the right shelves. That's the only time it ever happened to me, because when he said it, he didn't mean he wanted it done in 5 minutes. He wanted it done now. And that was a good lesson. That was a really
But that's
good
because
lesson.
there was no room. There were so many shoes at the
but
time.
yeah, I mean, you follow directions, and nowadays, like I said, it's different. They got cell phones. That was it. Only one time I went through that mess of having to pick up all those shoes that were on the ground.
Because-
How about your dad? What was your dad like?
Oh, my dad, the busier he was, the happier he was.
Happier he was, yeah.
Whistling.
Yeah.
You give him the hardest jobs, and he's
You're gonna
happy.
think this is funny. We hated closing time because
Yeah.
we loved being there. So I mean, I think
It
that
does
and
sound
my
weird,
dad was
but
the
it's
same,
true.
and my grandpa was the same.
What was their favorite day of the week?
Yeah, we liked Friday when we were young, when we worked,
longest
because we
day.
worked till 9 o'clock, and Saturdays, and it was. You learn a lot working for yourself. You learn a lot about people. You meet so many nice people, but then you always have to have the skills to take care of people that are a little bit harder to satisfy. Maybe they had a bad day, you don't know, and they're coming in, they're grumpy, and and that's where a joke would come in. There was a lot of joking in the shoe shop.
Which is why I don't
and,
work the counter if I don't have to.
Yeah, and you learn to listen.
Yeah.
You learn to listen.
That was his
And,
strength.
because you have to treat your customers good. Because another thing we learned from our grandpa and our dad is people can go spend their money anywhere.
That's true.
You gotta want them to feel they want to come here and spend their money, and that's so true. I think in any business, you have to make people feel that they're valued, because they're the ones in a small business. They put the bread on your table, So really was an important lesson, I think.
Yeah.
You give up some things being in a small business, but There's so many benefits that you don't get to experience when you work for someone else or a big company or whatever. You know, we don't have all the benefits, so to speak, that you have,
No.
but there's other things that you can't put a value on.
But
you know,
if you went to work or came home and it was like Thanksgiving, you had all your family around and you're having a good time, that's what it was like being at work, because I'm going to work with my brother, my grandpa, my dad,
sister, aunts,
my two aunts, my
our
grandma, and my cousin.
yeah,
So I mean, it's like, it's fun, and we all got the same sense of humor,
yeah,
which makes it
And
even
just
funner.
this one little shop?
yeah.
Yes, but
Basically.
you have to understand it. It's like, that's when shoes were really,
How did
People
we were at
everybody-
the height of that.
People sometimes will call up, they forget to pick up their shoes, they're
Yeah.
leaving the next day on vacation, and we didn't tell them, oh, sorry, you can't get your shoes.
Right.
We'd go and get them, you know, and people don't forget that either, you know, when you do stuff like that for them.
You know, you were asking what kind of guy my grandpa was. Grandpa used to come down after he was retired, or during his whole time, he used to come down on Sundays at
Yeah.
the shop. My grandma, no one asked him why. He had to come there and sit down for a little while,
Yeah, it was his,
because it's like part of your life and you can't get rid of it. I mean, that's where he was comfortable. He had to be there a little bit every day. And we never questioned him, what are you doing down there?
yeah,
You want to know something? I know what he was doing down there, because
Yeah.
I got the same feeling. Although I don't go on Sunday because my wife won't let me.
yeah,
But I understand it. That's why I don't want to retire. I mean, I always say I don't want to retire. I want to be able to retire. You know, I enjoy it so much because of the long history, and I feel like it's a part of it. When I'm at the shop, I feel like my grandpa's on the sewing machine, my dad's over on the finisher grinding something. I feel like we're still all there. I hadn't thought
Anything else
you.
about your dad? What other kind of qualities or?
You talk about his,
well, my dad, along with fixing shoes, he had a hobby. He wrote gags, or cartoons,
cartoonist.
as a hobby, not as a living, you know. So what he would do, and he wrote a lot of cartoons that the idea came from working in the shop
Right.
and working with people, you know. So he'd think up an idea, he'd put it on note cards, describe the scene, and he'd send maybe 7 or 8 out to a cartoonist, and the cartoonist is the one who would draw up the cartoon and
Right.
with the caption and go to the magazine or
sell
newspaper
it.
or whatever it was and sell it. And then once it's sold, they would send a check to my dad for his share. The cartoonist got the majority of the share because
Right.
he did all the legwork. But my dad's cartoons were at the time in all the major magazines. I mean, the young people now wouldn't know them, but Look, Life,
Argosy,
Argosy,
all that kind of stuff.
Reader's Digest, and he had one in Playboy. You know,
He did some Marmaduke,
he wrote some Marmaduke,
and there was another
then there
one
was
on the
a
West Coast.
Yeah, there was one called Butterside Up that he wrote a few panels for a comic strip, and so it was interesting because when we lived at our old house before we moved on the south side, we had a regular mailman, and he knew my dad from the store, and he knew he was a gag writer. Well, he could tell, you know, my dad would send out, it was usually like 7 ideas in an envelope. So he would wait, you know, to see if the mail was good, if Joe had, it was called a hold at that time that they were holding ideas. It got to the point where he would feel the return envelope, and he knew if there was holes taken out or if the whole things were
Yeah.
rejected, remember?
Yeah.
It was something.
But sometimes, even though it was rejected, he would send it to another cartoonist, and
it
he would be
sell.
able to sell it. But it all depends, I think, on the cartoonist himself.
Right, right. If it hit them, that
So
they
I mean,
liked it.
Dad never got the credit. It's
Right. But he had little quips in Reader's Digest.
but it was his.
and-
Yes.
Did he save this money for anything special? It was just kind of we're
Taking
just-
us for breakfast.
Yeah, we went out to eat a lot.
Yeah, we went
and,
for
and it
breakfast.
wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a full-time thing.
it was just
you
fun.
could write them for, you know, 4 or 5 months and then go 4 or 5 months and not have an idea to send.
You know, I
you
think
get
that-
writer's block. you know.
But it was sort of like his release.
But it was his relaxation.
Yes, he enjoyed it.
Exactly what it was, you know.
And was he a people person?
Oh, God, yeah.
He could, let's say you went to see him, you came in 30 years ago, and my dad didn't see you for 30 years, and you came back into the shop. Oh, Carl, you know, he had a knack for remembering names. I don't have that.
You don't have it. My
Paula
God.
does a little bit.
Paula's
Our
pretty
sister,
good at it.
She can remember. And, you know, and they always used to say the highest compliment you can pay a person is to remember their name. And he did, man.
I'll tell you.
He could remember them. He'd even remember the kids. Oh, you're all grown up, you know, and I knew your grandma, I knew your grandpa.
If my wife doesn't come home with her name tag from work, I get a little nervous what I call her, and it's not because I'm a womanizer. It's just got a bad memory.
People really like, I mean, I like when someone remembers my name, you know, when I go to a place, you know. And like I said, that's probably the highest compliment you can pay a person.
People used to just come in and chat?
Oh, yes, yeah. A lot of customers, they didn't have anything done. They were downtown, they come in, and sometimes they probably chatted longer than they want because my dad, especially if they talked boxing or wrestling or anything in sports, it was hard to get away for my dad because my dad loves sports, you know. And then there's us who can't, we can't hit a ball or throw a ball, you know, we weren't sports people.
I can hit a ball if I trip on it.
Yeah, that's about it, you know, but he loves sports, you know.
Yeah, he did.
So how do you remember customers?
Well, my education came from shining shoes.
Yeah.
You hear a lot when the stand it was a 3-chair stand. And man, I'll tell you, you hear grown-ups talking to each other, they forget that there's a kid there. You get an education in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. One story, I don't know, maybe you might have to add it to the sound. My dad was a young boy, he was about 10, so it still wasn't my grandpa's shop yet. But he was shining shoes, and there was 2 guys in there, and they were talking Italian, not knowing that my dad understood every
Italian.
single word. And they were talking about his boss and not paying protection money, and that maybe
was it the Black Hand or what?
Yeah, they
was
called
that
it
one
the
called?
Black Hand because he had gotten a letter from him or something. I don't know, not my grandpa. And they were talking about maybe eliminating him. So my dad never. He said he never broke his stride or speed of shining the shoes. Never looked up. They didn't have no idea, understood what he said. And then after he left, he told my grandpa what he had heard, and he said, well, don't ever speak about it. I mean, they didn't tell us until years later, telling stories, you know. And I think my grandpa
had to talk to the people.
Well, he talked because he knew the people. But
he also knew Mr. Roselli's.
Yeah, he said he's a stubborn man, and he's not going to do it.
You'll have to kill him.
And is it going to be worth it to do that over this small, whatever the amount of money was? It might have been $8 or $9 or something. I don't know. It was a small amount of money. So that was a story.
They listened to Grandpa on that.
But they listened.
They let it go.
They let it go. But not knowing that my dad understood, because my dad could read and write Italian, you know.
So if, going back to when you shine shoes, just as I'm going on about remembering things, if you didn't look up at somebody coming to sit in a chair to get their shoe shined.
I know where this is going.
Mm-hmm. Did you know who it was?
Yes.
A lot of times, yeah.
It sounds really silly, but you know, if somebody had more than one pair of shoes, it was usually the same shoe in another color.
Right.
So they wore the same style in 2 colors. And if you were a regular, I knew who you were by looking at the shoes. And I have the worst memory in the world, and I swear to God, today, if you mentioned a customer's name, and if I remember the customer, I can tell you what shoes the guy wore. Mm-hmm. What style?
Some people had unique sizes.
Yeah.
There was one guy, he wore an 11.5 4A, a quad A, which is super narrow
How
for a
wide
man.
would that be?
No, it's like this.
It's narrow. It's so narrow.
And a very narrow heel.
And he wore good shoes though. He had to.
He wore Allen Edmonds.
Allen Edmonds, you know.
Always wore the same
and
style.
He took great care of his shoes.
But
man.
the particular style that he picked out made the shoes look even
They made them
thinner.
look long and
because
thin.
it was like a Norwegian rough out
Right.
stitch on the outside, and it made it look.
Yeah. That's an Arrow's pair of shoes.
It
I
accentuated
remember.
the narrowness and the
Yeah.
longness of it.
And then there's people on the other side of the spectrum. Their shoes are so wide they might be a quad E.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and there's wider than that. There's that one shoe company that
Hitchcock.
sells Hitchcock shoes. Sell
They carry
all sizes,
uh,
but super wide.
heavy sizes.
Yeah.
You know,
super
wide sizes.
You know, so that ain't easy for people who wear those odd sizes. You know, you can't just walk in and pick a pair off the shelf. You know.
So how do you
there.
see this kind of repair business going on in the future?
Well, they are doing everything they can to get away from traditional materials.
Yeah.
At one time, polyurethane was only on Kmart type shoes and really cheap shoes. Then all of a sudden, Timberland, which is a very good boot company, outdoor footwear, came out with their sole with that polyurethane, and all of a sudden all the manufacturers jumped on board and started making stuff with polyurethane. The thing with polyurethane is it's very comfortable. It's cushiony for a period of time, but it has a built-in shelf life. And whether you wear the shoes or not, it still, after a certain amount of time, starts to break down and disintegrate. Either crumbles like sand or cracks, and you can't do nothing with it. As far as you can't glue the sole back down, you can't glue on top of it.
And for the industry now, it's not an industry that's expanding among people. They're not coming in to learn the trade.
No.
You know, it's not a trade that young people want to come into, you know. So in our family, we're the 7th generation
That sounds crazy.
of
but
shoe
it's
repair
true.
people. And for our family, it's going to be the last generation.
Yeah.
You know. And I'm sure that's happened in
Unless you want
in
to
lots
talk
of
to your
shop-
son about his
you know,
kids.
yeah, they're not going to do it. And you know, years ago, shoe shining was a good business. My dad
Yes.
made more money shining shoes when they worked for Mr. Roselli than my grandpa made fixing shoes, getting paid for them. You know, and of course, at that time, turned all his money over to his dad and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And that was true for so many of those shoe shine kids. They made so much money because there
Yeah.
was so many shoe shines. We had a lot of shoe shine boys over the years. You know, it would have been fun maybe to have a reunion at one time, but now so many of them are gone.
Our cash register still has 5 of the names.
Yeah,
on
the
there.
original ones. Because
And how many shines he did that week
Yeah.
so far?
From 1937,
Yeah.
the cash register was old. And we joked about, we put a sign on it, and when everyone was worried about Y2K, and our sign said on the register, no need to worry, I'm Y2K ready, because it did nothing. You know, it was just punch the number in, and that was
When
it.
I was
Didn't
doing
add.
it, a huge week would be like, you know, 125, 150
Right.
shines for me, and then another shine boy. But like
Yeah.
Dad said, it was
500-600. And
for himself a week, and that's when he had like 5 shine boys.
Right. 2 stands.
Did you ever want to do anything else, or ever think that you would want to do anything else?
I think for me, my escape was because when I was a kid, I loved trains, and I thought, well, that would be cool to be like an engineer, work on the railroad. And then the other thing is, because I like to eat, I would have liked to have a little cafe, but I only served the food that I want to eat, which was going to be Italian. So I think
Which was quite a bit of things. So
it would have been a small audience. You know, you got to like butter,
Yeah.
garlic, and sauce. You know.
I don't
But-
think we have any regrets.
No, God, no.
Can't think of any.
No, not regrets, just that there was something else you thought.
No, you know-
I wish maybe I would have done something.
That was for me. That was my. It was probably more of a fantasy than anything,
Yeah.
because if I hate this job so much, when I go home, I go on and talk to my friends on these shoe repair sites every night for a couple hours.
He's got a great collections shoemaker
So do
cobbler
you.
statues, but not like you know.
Well, it was a
And
competition.
It was a competition.
Until the
We-
internet came
Yeah.
along.
We go out antiquing our own separate ways, and then
Yeah.
come home and compare what we found in statues. But he's got quite a few that are
do
really,
have a
really
lot.
nice. You know.
So do you.
Yeah, not as many as you, because.
But it's sort of, I'd like to think it means more to me because I've done it so long.
He's got some on display at the shoe shop.
Yeah, I got, those are
you know,
extras.
the extra ones. But
Maybe,
you don't realize how many there are out there, not just in shoe, but there's tons of them, you know.
what I was thinking of, maybe like when my time goes, you could have me stuffed and put in the window on display myself.
With your hammer in one hand and the knife in the other.
Shine Boys out for a bucket of steam.
Oh, yeah, my grandpa was a
You want to
joker.
know about his personality,
Yeah,
Grandpa's.
he sent one of the Shine Boys over to one of the
Walgreens.
Walgreens it was, and
a new kid.
and said to buy a bucket of steam.
Go over to Walgreens, send him out for a bucket of steam to wash the shine stand.
Oh my God! And then he comes, Ray, they don't have any
Steam.
steam buckets. You know.
Or my dad's sense of humor, someone would come in and say, can you punch a hole in my belt? And my dad would say, I'd like to, but my holes, I got them on order. They're not
Yeah,
going to
we're
be
out
here
of holes,
till
you know.
for a couple days yet. You're kidding. No,
Some
but,
people-
you know.
Little different things.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just, or
Well, Thank you for talking with me today.
thank you for
Yeah,
having
thanks.
us.
It's fun.